So with that, welcome to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours, everyone. Thank you for taking your time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community mentorship and learning. I'm your host, David Albright, joined by Geraldine Hall from lovely Tokyo. I'm a principal solution engineer here at Salesforce and Military Trailblazer. Each week, we invite a co-host or co-host to take part in the conversation so we can leverage their experience, expertise, and unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session is how to excel in your Salesforce career as a leader. So if you've ever been interested in any of these, this is a good session for you. I'd like to welcome and briefly introduce our co-host for tonight's session, Paul McCollum. Paul is the VP of Architecture at PerfectVision, a global leader in infrastructure product solutions. Plainly stated, Paul is also a leader in the Salesforce ecosystem. He is a 3X Dreamforce speaker, the president of the Dallas Salesforce Developer Group, the founder of We Dreamin' Salesforce event in North Texas, a certified UX master and user experience champion, as well as a prolific volunteer in the Salesforce community. So great to have you co-hosting Office Hours with us. Would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself further and share your Salesforce story?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I have a special kinship to supporting veterans and working into the computer space. And as I tell my story, hopefully you'll catch on to why. And I think I'm on. We might be on the same page, but if I'm off, you'll tell me. My dad was a Marine. He served as a pilot over in some of the unnamed areas or no unnamed conflicts. In Malaysia, anyway, a long time ago, and I was born on a military base, but he left the military when I was about 3, so I don't have any real memories of living that life. I have been a computer nerd pretty much since it feels like since electricity was invented. Used to ride my bike across town to work on one of the 3 public computers that they had. Code was written and stored on cassette tape. There was no hard drives. Floppy disks were not quite in vogue yet. So started writing my first code there. If you've written code on punch cards, you've been programming longer than me. But for me, that was in the 2nd grade. And that was not very common back then. Did not know it would become a career. Science was what I gravitated to after dinosaurs and photography kind of left central focus. Studied microbiology and was pre-med through most of my career, or at least most of my shooting. That was where you took science and did science degrees from my narrow perspective. As harder science came into view, I was looking at molecular genetics and started to major in that. I thought I'll go into research. Research and practicing medicine should pay about the same, and the career path should be about the same. And I got all the way through my degree in microbiology, all the while playing with computers. Thinking it wasn't a career path really at the time, but I got all the way through it, and I was promised an amazing opportunity to be a PhD track lab assistant, where for less than what I was making at the drugstore, working part-time from high school and college. And that would have been the next 4 to 8 years of my life working on a PhD thesis, cleaning glassware for somebody else. And that's if I was lucky. I got a whiff of that bait and switch on the salary and career from doing cancer research, and all of my friends that I'd been tutoring for computer science had been telling me I was in the wrong career, and they were all moving down to Dallas from Oklahoma City and Norman, where I lived. And taking great jobs and turned out to be making a lot more than what I was targeted making in my current career path. So I undeclared my major, declared linguistics and computer science, spent 3 semesters figuring out what they called computer science and realizing that it was about 5 or 6 years behind the actual times of what was actually going on. Fortunately, I built a good network of computer friends that were teaching modern computing techniques. And then after, like I said, 1.5 years, 2 years of treading water in academic computer science learning. I took a job down in Dallas and almost immediately hit the dot-com bust after about a year's worth of having a great time being an architect. The bottom fell out of the market. The technology that I had come down there for, I had changed once already, and then that market fell out and had to reinvent myself basically 3 times in about 2 years' time. So I realized that investing time and learning was really the skill set that I needed to bring to the forefront, and each of the actual skill sets was just basically a stock that you're day trading in. So now I look at the marketplace, I figure out what's paying the best or what has the best career path currently, and I go learn that. So after the initial bait and switch and falling on my face 3 or 4 times, I got it pretty quickly a healthy perspective on career management. And like I said, with that is where hopefully that pans into, I think, some of the need to do career switching from different career paths and lifestyle changes, where I've been trying to figure out how to set up a Merivis franchise or some sort of outreach inside of Dallas to help transition and guide people through, if you're looking going from military career focused into technology career focused, being able to help bridge that path. So I've done that. I've seen it. I can explain it from the ground up just because I'm old and have seen all the technology as it was getting born. I wrote a book a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago it came out. Sorry, shameless. I'm super proud of it. It's ridiculous, but practical Salesforce architecture, and I'm trying to explain the Salesforce ecosystem to people who are coming from other careers and other understandings, to learn penetrate the marketing veil that Salesforce puts around by naming everything cool names. So
and then changing the name,
and then changing the name every 10 minutes. Yeah. Chapter 1 first call out is half of this book won't make any sense, because between buying it and getting it shipped to you, the names have all changed.
Yeah, I probably came and make fun of that. Geraldine and I probably aren't supposed to be laughing at that, but yeah, that's it's tough. It's tough some days because it's like, oh. So that's interesting, and I think everyone we have on here is a pivot in one way or another. So a lot of your conversation and your career path will make sense, like, because I think we'll dive into it as we get into the deeper discussion, but the imposter syndrome, I think, sometimes comes out of that, oh, I'm a pivot, right? I'm not supposed to be here. I don't know this. I didn't grow up in computers. And I think that is a common thread, and yet is probably an unrealistic one as well, right? I think the truth of the matter is everyone is trying to figure it out every day. And I don't mean that in some philosophical way, but it's like the tech is changing, the names are changing, all of it, and you're constantly trying to figure it out. The practical architecture, we'll talk about that book, because practical architecture is much different than theoretical architecture, right? When you look at the well-architected website. But I digress. Let me continue on here. For those joining for the first time, we always like to briefly explain the purpose of these office hours. These sessions are an informal get-together for gathering of military trailblazers and allies to explore non-technical Salesforce career and branding related topics to help you achieve your professional development and career related goals. The next hour is intended to be an opportunity for collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call is encouraged to step up and help answer questions from your perspective, which will provide additional diversity of experience to the answers given. Please keep an eye on the chat window during tonight's session. I and others on the call share a lot of great information there, including learning, network, and employment opportunities. If you'd like to ask a question, feel free to do so. If you don't feel as comfortable speaking up, you can also post your questions in chat. We'll do our best to monitor the chat window, and I'll also be looking for raised hands. Finally, tonight's session is being recorded. If you'd like to share an attribution-free comment, please let me know before speaking, and we'll make sure it's edited out of the final recording. So with that said, let's dive into, you've been kind of a leader, you've been a pivot. Let's talk about, you kind of shared your personal story. When did you first recognize really the importance of leadership in your career? Oh, you're muted.
So I started working in SharePoint and joined my first user group, and I got asked to do something at my new job. SharePoint was like the fourth or fifth new platform that I decided, hey, I want to live like the people that I see doing this. So at nights and weekends, I was learning how to write code in .NET and SharePoint because that was the hype train. That was the hot new platform at the time. I was excited about what it could do, and I went to a user group. I'd got my first job. Let's see, did I go to the user group? I think I was at the user group first, and I got asked to roll out a feature um, after my first couple months in a new role where I was full-time doing SharePoint stuff. So living the dream, and then got asked to do something really risky. And I got a chance to raise my hand during one of these group meetings that I'd been to enough that I felt comfortable asking a dumb question. And I asked everybody's opinion about this thing I was about to roll out. And I got told, it's awful. Don't do it. It's a nightmare. It's this, 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 and this. And so the first part of the question would have had me petrified. My boss told me to do this. When they told me why, and I knew the people there and the reputation of the people there that were leaders and sharing this, I could bring that back to work and defend my position and say, it's not me saying this, it's these experts saying this thing is not ready for prime time. Having that backup and being able to sidestep that landmine that would have ruined my career at that place was huge. And from then on, that I do user groups. By the end of like 2 or 3 years, I was helping to run the user group. They made me the president of the user group, which meant I was occasionally a speaker, but mostly just brought drinks in a huge cooler and lugged it to my car early to the location. But that was paying the dues to be part of that community and getting first right of refusal on what topics we wanted to learn, speakers we wanted to have in. So that was where leadership got me to the forefront of learning and connections. And I learned being able to ask somebody a pointed question from a similar background. I can assimilate years or months of data of learning and hitting my head against a rock and just get a simple explanation from a peer that has a similar background. And from then on, I hate public speaking. I am the person I pretend to when I speak loves it. But that is a complete facade. I'm flop sweating right now. I hate it, but it gets me in front of smart people that can translate things for me, and I can ask questions and makes those connections. So I have to do it. It is a skill set, I think, more important than golf in the game of business, but pretty close. And that's why I do that. I do that to get in front of people, to get into situations where I can be challenged and ask people challenging questions, and it turns 10-minute conversations into years of experience that I can bring forward and use in my career.
No, I think you say a lot of things that actually resonate in there. I already kind of mentioned imposter syndrome. We talked about a lot on here because we're all in various stages of coming into the ecosystem and things like that. It's very easy in the beginning. Even now, like I'm a solution engineer, principal solution engineer working on some really big accounts. There's times where I'm like, man, I don't need to be speaking. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I think there's a couple things in there. You have to have the fortitude to go like, I know enough, or I know where to look. Like I often say, particularly with Salesforce, right? And this applies to wherever you're at. You're not the smartest person. Usually there's a whole bunch of really smart people standing behind you that you can go reach to, right? Like particularly in Salesforce, where I can reach out directly to the different product teams and things like that to be like, hey, how is this supposed to work? And so on. But having the fortitude to say like, I need to stand up and say something. They have called upon me. I need to posit some kind of opinion. And one of those, though, is what you kind of talked about is you kind of have to go and research it, right? When Geraldine and I work together, she's very, very good at finding things. And I've said it before on here, her Google Foo is phenomenal. It
Yeah.
runs circles around me. And but being able to find that, research it, so that when you come to speak, you have a background. It's not like, well, I heard on a forum somewhere. That usually isn't going to make it past the first sniff test. So but yeah, I like some of the things you said. Iris, you have a comment?
Sorry, couldn't find the mute button for a moment.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Thank you so much for being here, Paul. Taking the time to just drop some knowledge on us. One of the things, like, I deal with people who are very new to the ecosystem, and I'm not going to lie, I'm still a newbie myself. When it comes to architecture, I feel like that word is thrown around all the time. Like, I get.
And which word? I'm sorry.
Architecture.
Architecture. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yes. Like, I get some people who, like, I just had a service member email me saying, oh, I would love to be an architect. I was like, you're spelling Salesforce in 2 words, dude. Okay. And then I have some people who want to aspire to be it, but they don't fully understand it. In just a couple of sentences, would you just give us a little bit of a synopsis of what you view architecture to be?
you got.
Bring that book up, Paul.
Yeah, and it's actually, what is an architect is one of the chapters in it. And I get in fights about that. I offend people a lot, so this is going to early ruin our relationship here.
Nothing. You good.
So the general term architecture has a connotation of building. In business, so if you build something, you're an architect. And I disagree with that. In the business world, as people were coming up with fancier titles to justify fancy promotions, a senior developer became a software architect. And I think that was the first time that term got so badly abused. There were system architects and software architect, and those are valid if you keep those terms together. But the generic term of architect, for me, means somebody that brings different disciplines together and tries to overlay the values and the pluses and minuses of different systems, has those different paradigms, and can bring solutions that involve different disciplines. If you are just working in Salesforce, and it's really hard to say just Salesforce because there's so many sub-technologies even in the core platform. If you know the difference between flows, workflows, process builders, I'm throwing all the old terms out. If you know how and when and where to adapt those, there is an essence of architecture there. When you see different terminologies and different skill sets and go, hey, if I'm working in pub/sub technologies over in Kafka, but I also have the platform of BentBus and Salesforce, and those seem really similar. And if you start seeing those similarities between two very distinct platforms, to me, that's an architect mindset. And behind the scenes, they're the same thing. They are at Kafka is platform events. Platform events is Kafka, but they don't sell it. I didn't know that. It was just by sniffing through some of the pieces of it that I went, oh, architecturally, that's very similar to this. And making those alignments from in platform to outer platform is what I consider the architect skill set. And that will make a lot of people mad because that's kind of a progression normally. But for me, I see architect as a cross-platform, different shearing models, looking at different paradigms, skill set. And now that may just be my personal bias because that's what I've done. And that's the label I chose for myself kind of since I started my career. And I've always been in networking. I've always been in multiple systems. And I work with different software engineers, and I have to help the DBA programmers understand the web programmers. And you have to get to that commonality and say, yeah, this is the SQL statement that will make it work, and this is the performance that's not happening, or this is the call that's not being made right. And you have to being able to translate in those in that gray area. To me, that's where I qualify it. But a solution architect is building solutions inside of a single platform. That's usually a Salesforce architect. Megan and I had the agreement together that you had to do at least federation. If you're doing federation from an external system like an Okta or a Ping, you start hearing those external terms. You're not just working in the point and click interface that is Salesforce, and those other concepts are forced on you. That's usually the first kind of architect feather I think you get to put in your hat as a Salesforce architect. So long-winded answer, sorry, it was definitely a soapbox that I've been on before. So.
Oh, I can tell your passion from that answer. From that, I'm going to be the first one to request a copy of that book, please.
I said, don't buy it. If you see me, I'll give you a copy. If you have any questions I'll give you the table of contents, and just hit me up and ask me questions about it. I love to share more than I love to do anything. Again, that's been my whole continuing education pattern. Is the more the more you share, the more your bowl is plentiful. The more you teach, the more you learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the fact that it's practical architecture too, because that can be a discussion in its own right. Theoretical versus practical versus what do we need to get done here, and what's going to reduce the amount of tech debt down the road. So
the title was actually kind of forced on me. It is fairly theoretical. Of there's a Christmas present under the tree, and it's wrapping paper, but it looks like a guitar. I'm trying to get you to the guitar and not to the it's still kind of hidden, it's draped in other things. So just don't let the practical architecture, I'm not sure how true to form that title is to what the actual content is. So just beware on that, David, the clarification.
Oh, now I have to get it. Now I'm curious. So everything you've kind of described to your background there, it sounded pretty heavy dev, right? I heard a lot of .NET, some DBA, some SQLs in there. All that good fun that's actually making my head hurt. What inspired you then to get into the Salesforce ecosystem and become an architect in Salesforce?
So when I learned computers, there was only a command line. There was no graphics. You were writing code just to view files and just to write in it. So to me, there was never a non-developer version. It was only weird when somebody tried to put pictures and shapes on the screen and make you do stuff with that. So I kind of fortunately started with the completely different mindset. I'm not a very good programmer. I'm good at getting things to work barely. And I usually know when it's ugly, and I hand it off to somebody else once I've proven that it can work. So I build a lot of POCs in dev, but I'm a hardcore scripter, not a very good programmer. And if you make me use Git, I will quit. I don't like learning all of the accessory. I loved Salesforce because the dev console was web-based and it was instant compile. There was no build step, instant gratification. You knew what was going on. And I was able to do that from my phone. My phone supports a desktop interface. And when my laptop broke before Dreamforce, I was able to plug my phone into the TV at the hotel and write code on that in the super lightweight interface. Can't stand Eclipse. If I never install the Java binaries again, that will be too soon. But Salesforce, I was already working in communities, already had that passion for networking, and seeing the Salesforce, I knew where Salesforce was as an enterprise architect and what purpose it served. And 7-Eleven was busy trying to buy a franchise store regional manager bespoke application. Very narrow focus. They wanted it to use exactly the terminology. And I was like, okay, that's not actually what you want. You don't want something that's super customized and somebody built yesterday. You need a more generic tool set for mobile workforce management and customer engagement. If you swap out our franchisee with the term customer and you swap out regional manager with sales, Salesforce, who is leading in everything else, is actually the perfect fit. It just doesn't use the right lingo. I spent a year or so teaching 7-Eleven to not buy some kitsch program that just used the right terms but didn't have the functionality. My account team convinced me to enter an innovation contest And I threw some JavaScript together that I'd been playing with for a couple of years on Google Maps, and made a Google Maps user interface for Salesforce, to where when you opened it up, it showed you a map of where you were at, where your stores in your area were, and you clicked on the store and it took you to the context of that store. You didn't have to learn accounts and contacts and reports. You started in context. And if you were close enough to a store, it just assumed that's where you were probably looking into, and it would take you right there. So it used your location to intuit the navigation and save you a couple of steps. That won the contest. I was one of 3 winners. They took me to Dreamforce, and I presented there, and I was hooked. They told me about the Ohana, and I was like, Ohana, that's what I do. I learn through communities, and it was pretty much love at first sight. The first person whose speech I heard talking about Ohana, I followed her for a long time, ended up working for her, and have been running user groups and conferences to continue that practice. And the fanboyism, the community of help that Salesforce has, is next to none. There is no peer in the ecosystem. Of the dozens of languages and platforms that I've worked in, there's nothing like it. And it threads the needle. When you have a bad day at work, this is my other thing, that being a Salesforce and community leader is my secret identity. I have a bad day. Clark Kent has a bad day at work. Thursdays, week, user group, Salesforce Saturday, I become a hero teaching people and helping people and being a leader in the community. So it doesn't matter how many bad days at work, I'm always going to have a good day with the Ohana and working with people and teaching and learning, and has made my life geometrically better. I feel like I have a career now. My imposter syndrome has started to go away, and I actually feel like an active piece of a technology and professional expertise, as opposed to someone just trying to survive day-to-day jobs.
Yeah, 100%. And again, I can totally relate to that. You know, I've had some bad days at work, and actually come on here and the day has gotten better, just being able to kind of give back and have some of these conversations and have one-on-ones with people and things like that. It's interesting because I agree. The Ohana is, I have not spent my whole career in tech, but the Ohana is just so unusual to everything else that I have ever seen. Just that the ability to kind of reach out, like I can reach out to people in Salesforce or outside Salesforce in the ecosystem and the Ohana, and people are just open arms. And that is really refreshing, right? Because everyone's kind of struggling to get by, right? Nobody's got it all figured out. So trying to just reach out to kind of say, hey, I'm interested in your job, or I'm interested in trying to find out about something like this. Dev, as I kind of went down the road on dev, right, reaching out to folks to kind of figure out some of the Apex and LWC stuff, people are more than happy to help you, right? There's some amazing folks on YouTube who do it for free, right? Put full courses out there for free, expect no payback on it. So what are some of the biggest challenges you've faced, though, as you've come into the Salesforce Architect scene?
The nomenclature, really, like, so that was I remember a lot having, I get so much mileage out of telling it, and it's chapter 1 in my book. I spent forever with a Unix account, with an email account, with a Windows NT user account, resetting passwords, brute force attacking user accounts and passwords. The word account to me means something different than it means in Salesforce. And I got stuck badge 5 trying to figure out how to tell somebody in Trailhead support that I needed my account fixed. And they're like, okay, what company do you work for? Well, this isn't a company thing. I banged my head against the term account trying to get my user account reset so many times. So all that is probably the hardest thing, is it came up very customized from a sales perspective. And so there's a lingual drift across all of the terminology to lean towards more sales vernacular than it is standard technology vernacular. So if you learn computer science anywhere, you have to kind of relearn it with the Salesforce labels on it. Once you get those, it's the same thing as everything else. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. It's all computers and software and programming. And as long as you know finding out where something keeps its brain, as long as you've got the right label and the right chart, you can do just about anything, and your skills will transfer and become more portable.
Now, how about you kind of came in with a little more of a command line dev background, and you probably came in to Salesforce when we were running Classic. How did that?
Just on the other side, experience had been out for a few years. I've never actually had to do a Classic conversion. I miss it a little bit because I write a hacky JavaScript, and that was a lot easier to do with the Classic buttons. But I've found other ways to insert my crappy JavaScript into Salesforce since then.
So let me ask one question here. Since you've already offended all the architects in the world, we might as well go for broke and let's just get this over with. So with a dev background, what were your thoughts of programmatic versus declarative, right? With the, mostly 90% solution of low code, no code.
I am a hardcore Flownatic. I have switched over the reduced the reduced number of Legos that you have to learn how to play with inside of flows to be able to get stuff done, I think makes it a rapid uptick environment. Salesforce makes stuff work in Apex first, and almost immediately thereafter it's in flows. I see flows as the way of the future, where I learned text and most code is text. Programming in flow is still code. You are still building structural step-based solutions. It's just a different shape of the same vocabulary. It's a different colored font. It's not even different it's not even different structures. It's all the same mental structures. So I'm flow first. I love being that jerk that says we can do everything in flows inside of a solutioning meeting. There were exactly 3 reasons to use Apex and not flows, and I broke one of those with my infinite flows pattern. And that's, I think, one of the things I stood on the back for a while. I figured out how to do recursive flow calling because I wrote a flow that was supposed to work perfect, and I put a lot of time into it based on client requirements. Like, yeah, we have 300 accounts. We need to send emails to them once a month in bulk. I wrote a thing that looped over all 300, sent emails out, followed a bunch of rules. I said, oh, well, and it broke in production. We have 300 accounts. Well, we have 300 main accounts. We actually have 1,200 in the actual database. And that was enough to break flow processing. It was too many records, too many iterations. So I started hacking at that. And then finally, after telling somebody the hacks where I was making multiple copies of it, to try and reiterate the flow and have it run and keep track of where it was, and 300 this time, 300 the next time.
Yeah.
I was keeping 12 copies. It was really nasty. And I had some discussions on answers.salesforce.com, and somebody brought up how platform events broke out of the transaction limit and let you escape one of the governors. So for 5 years, until they came up with batch flows, like 2 or 3 years ago, this was the only way to do it. And if too many records was a reason you didn't use flows, I had a template for how to get around that by passing in data and passing it out and having the flow keep calling itself. I saw it do 1.5 million records after helping somebody on a Saturday that saw the presentation, said he had a good use case for it. We spent a couple hours talking about it. He got it like that. Great day, great Saturday, teaching somebody, sharing a hack pattern. I did take care to anonymize. I threatened everybody that I taught that they shouldn't tell people my name because it was kind of intentionally skirting the rules of governor limits, and you could write an infinite loop in there, but you can do that with Apex too. And but it was fun. And so yeah, like I said, I will take the Pepsi challenge. Nope, we can do it in flows. If it doesn't do large in-memory mapping, because lock records was the other one, and that finally got taken away. But mapping large data sets together, if you're trying to look at a big long list of users and a big long list of attributes and cherry pick in between them, where you would do array math and array lookups and get finds inside of arrays, that Salesforce isn't great at yet. Or Flows isn't great at yet. That's the only reason. If I have that massive data set that has to be looked at side by side or side by side in multiple dimensions, only reason you'll get me to tap out and say, yeah, we should use Apex. Unless there's a lot of
Apex though.
Yeah, you can, but I mean just pure Apex or just
Yeah.
pure flow on everything 99% of the time. And then if the solution's already written, like if a feature is 90% written by Apex because they didn't have the flow foo that you should have, I won't write something that's kind of a hangnail in flows that you have to, okay, it's most of the code's here except or over here, and then make that hard to find. I will lean into if most of it's Apex, we'll keep it in Apex.
Yeah, agreed. Always tricky. There's certain things that code still works a little better, and you just have to. That I think is true architecture, right? Figuring out when to use what, when, and why, right? And what's the cost. So we're just past the midpoint there. Before I forget, let's get a group photo for sharing on social media. We'll plan on posting on LinkedIn and Twitter tomorrow, and we'll tag everyone in the photo. If you only have your first name showing in Google Meet and want to be tagged, please feel free to include your full name in the chat window. It makes it much easier to tag you. For everyone who wants to grab or participate in the photo, please unmute your video and we'll grab a screenshot. I'll give you a countdown here shortly. Everyone can hold your questions, and then Amanda, we're going to get to your question right after that. All right. I have to hang out my mouth and look stupid because that's what I do on a continual basis. Gerald knows it's a fun fact. All right. Everyone ready? I'll give you a countdown. 3, 2, 1. Oh man, I look wicked cheesy on this one.
I tried to grab one when you weren't thinking about it earlier. I'll share that with you.
Geraldine and I and Dave usually try and grab one when we're not looking, so we don't look too bad. But it's I have an art for not looking great. Amanda, your question. You're up.
Hi there. Hi, Paul. Thank you. So the question being, obviously, a lot of us in this group I know are new, learning, and I know there's certain opinions about, I've noticed out in the ecosystem about, yes, you can do flow, but really you should know how to code first because of the just the ability to, when you use Apex, you have to write test classes so that your code is not going to break, essentially. And you don't do that in flow. I mean, some people do fault paths and such like that, but the easy accessibility of flow, as an admin, as a lot of us kind of going into this, we don't know how to code. Do you think that it's necessary? Do you think that it is better? Is it best practice that everybody at least knows the basics of how to code, the basics of Apex, to be the best Flownatic, to do the best that you can? Or is it even necessary? Do you see that being?
I don't. That is a great question, and I've had good conversations with this, and some of them have gotten heated with Apex developers. The things that seasoned developers do that you should learn doesn't have anything to do with the language. You can learn good practices in flows as you're learning to flow, and you can be a bad Apex developer just as much as you can be a bad flow developer. There are, and I've done a couple of sessions and enterprise level flow building, patterns for documentation, commenting things. Test classes you can actually do test classes for flows, but I know plenty of bad code that has working test classes. You can pass a test class and still have it be miserably built. Flow is guiding you into better structures, and it limits you earlier and keeps you from making some of those same mistakes, and kind of pushes you into good patterns where Apex is, can just be a command line and you just type whatever. 30 different people will do things 30 different, 30 different ways. In flows, there are a little bit fewer ways to do that. And you can see and interpret flows much faster. So you're almost writing auto-documenting code by having it go in the flows flowchart view. And I can share that with you 10 times faster. That code is more supportable than text written code that anybody can write any way they want. They don't have the same vocabulary forced on them. When I create a query variable, I don't have to call it get this, and it doesn't have the icon next to it that says that that's what that's doing. So I think the potential for Flow to be a better and more healthy Flow programming language is there for sure. There will be more flexibility. There's a little bit more power still behind Apex for some bespoke use cases, but there's patterns in Apex where you'd say one trigger per object. To me, I love having this argument. I think one is a stupidly specific number, and I think few triggers to have manageable packages of code and decipherable code, not because there's any performance value to having just one, but it's more of a maintenance thing. I think there's probably two. I would probably prefer 2 triggers per object. I would have 2 flows per object. In Process Builder, I had 2 process builders per object, one for create and one for update. As long as you have a pattern for something, and we all agree on it, that's a good pattern. 1 trigger per object, like it's a mantra of development in Apex, it's catchy, and the number 1 is easy for people to parse and harder to argue with. But it really just means have a predictable structure to your code patterns, and you can do that in Apex, or you can do that in Flow and do that in Apex.
You just speak like an architect, because you're very vested into talking about governors limits and all of these things that a lot of people don't really know or understand. They're just trying to learn what a master detail relationship is. I'm not sure if David still knows. Maybe.
It's questionable.
Yeah.
I have a series.
I appreciate it.
On UCAN2 Dev or Dev Up. I did a series of what you need to learn to get into to Salesforce development, and it's kind of neutral between programming concepts that apply a lot to flows just as much as code. And Apex is kind of a pared down version of Java, so there's less to learn than regular vanilla Java, and so it's easier to approach. I think everybody should be a builder. I think there's an absolute flood of people wanting admin jobs in Salesforce. And I think the way to set yourself apart and hop into that Salesforce life is by being able to be a builder. You can almost go through a full developer interview and say, I can do that in flows, I can do that in flows. And if I need to, I'll do it in Apex and hit all of those questions. But it's still not quite socially acceptable to be a developer that doesn't write Apex code or doesn't write LWC. And I am trying to push for those days, because I think that is going to be a good day and a great day for easily accessible code building patterns to be considered a tier level skill set to writing indecipherable old school code.
Yeah, I think I got much better at Flow when I started really doing Apex, and you started seeing those same concepts, right? Hey, I'm doing an iteration. I am doing, a loop. What am I trying to do here? What is this variable doing for me? And then you start to see that, and you're like, oh, duh. Yeah, it's the same stuff. It's just doing it with drag and drop.
Yeah, bulkification is one I think flow builders should learn, and that is a good pattern. And why that matters is an architecture concept that helps people understand the platform, and it's equally valuable in both skill sets.
Yeah, and you said process builder, and I'd like to just say RIP, because I miss process builder.
That was a simplified, and it basically is just an even more simplified version of Flow.
Yeah, for sure. Iris asked, what about Data Cloud? I went to an event yesterday where they touted Data Cloud could take any data and conform to Salesforce format. Am I way off? Still learning.
Okay, yeah, no, we're just gonna make me hated by everybody now. We're gonna tick off Salesforce. Data Cloud I find to be a lot simpler than the hype. To me, it has the potential for you to build some really interesting data transforms. It has some powerful functionality, but at its core, Data Cloud is picking up data from one place, um, merging it together or tearing it apart based on rules that you build, powerful rules, and then either making that data available to other places or pushing it someplace else. You can do a lot of the same kind of things with pivot tables. You can do a lot of it with other ETL tools. MuleSoft has an ETL tool. Right now, where Data Cloud is in my humble opinion, Data Cloud is a set of raw tools for people weaving together disparate sources of customers from different systems and trying to find a single definition of that user so that you don't spam them. You don't have 5 different, if I come in through your web portal and through your custom app for customers, and I call into the help desk and I give you, and they write down 3 different pronunciations of my name, you don't send me 5 different emails trying to sell me the same product, and I report spam because it comes from the same source. And you've soured that relationship with me because you obviously don't know who I am and aren't keeping track of it across all of your channels. That kind of specific need is where I see Data Cloud. Salesforce data inside of Salesforce data is Salesforce data. Service Cloud and Sales Cloud sit in the same database. If you have dedupe rules in there that are healthy, I have trouble pitching Data Cloud as a use for it. If you're not sending it out to an external system that it needs to be in a very specific format and or specifically timely, Marketing Cloud is still, from an architecture perspective, the current iteration of Marketing Cloud is an external system that has a different data definition than what Salesforce has. So there is a translation that has to happen between Salesforce platform and Salesforce Marketing Cloud that requires a tool. And I think Data Cloud is a good missing piece for that advanced data translation for Marketing Cloud. And I think it'll be even a bigger missing piece for Marketing Cloud Growth Edition, which is the in-platform version of Marketing Cloud that is not a separate platform. So I think Marketing Cloud Growth Edition, which I think will be Marketing Cloud 2.0 plus Data Cloud, is going to be the new Marketing Cloud. So I think it'll behoove you, if you're invested in Marketing Cloud, it's basically a sibling to Marketing Cloud Next, and it's a good idea to get in there and learn that. But that is, I know, sorry, David, you work at Salesforce. I am reading a lot of tea leaves. I like to let people go off a camera when they work for Salesforce so they don't accidentally nod or dispel my my prediction because it is completely an outsider. Yeah.
No, I think you're right on, right? It's really about how do I get my data from data warehouses and data lakes and things like that translated into the Salesforce records so that I can see all the data in one record copied from different places, right? Amanda, you have a question?
I always have a question, David. So you kind of described yourself, Paul, as like the day trader of learning and knowing where the market is and understanding what's the next best thing to learn. And I think everybody here wants to know that because we're all learning Salesforce, but it's tight right now. And we want to know what else we can do. I mean, you've dropped some pearls here, you know, obviously just being an admin isn't enough. You have to have some dev skills. But obviously, you know, being a Salesforce architect is one thing, and you have a perspective of architecting over a whole bunch of different systems. And I think I'd love to hear about other things that you think would be complementary for those of us trying to get a tech career that may or may not end up being Salesforce.
So I don't see anything major on the horizon that won't be homogenized. Like AI is amazing and it's its own language. I think AI will build up, add, you know, a 10 or 15 or 20% value to a wide swath of tools. I don't think it will be for most of us something that you go in and learn AI any more than you learn how to create Salesforce executables to run on the server. I think it will be turned into more user accessible tools in the very near future that we'll be able to drag and drop them into Salesforce. The only thing that I am watching from a skill set outside of the norm, and I won't talk about this too much, is VR. I think the options for surround sound information based off of glasses, that these still look dumb. You can't wear these and not look weird. They are getting them down to where they're the size of regular reading glasses. And I think once the stigma of this looks weird and it's uncomfortable, being able to access information with the tilt of your head and not 14 clicks, I have a 49-inch monitor here and it's too small. When you have something that has head tracking, you have a high-res screen at every single point that you look at. You turn your head left and you've covered the space of 14 high-resolution monitors. So I think navigating in 3D space will be something big and interesting, and there'll be probably, when it gets that accessible, being able to translate 2D experiences into 3D will be a next new skill. That will be the new hot architecture. I don't know when that's going to trip. Otherwise, user experience is a fascinating place to work in, and I've only ever done really good things, really tangible things, but except for avoiding icebergs. I'm usually just saying, don't go there, because this will be a huge train wreck. You don't get credit for a train not hitting a wreck, not getting into a wreck. But I have gotten credit whenever I looked at an end-to-end architecture solution and saw the thing you're wanting from here, and by the time it comes out of that hole over there, the users aren't going to use it. It's not going to be valuable. So trying to keep that user experience and what the user is trying to get out of it from end to end has been a big value add experience. There's a lot of, okay, I'll write the code. Okay, I'll write the code. But people not keeping that end user perspective and being able to imagine and dream what it's going to look like when you get done writing the code, when you get done building the flows, is a big thing. And there's some good rules out there. The master certification I have from Nielsen Norman, I love hanging out with those people because they're talking next level stuff to try and make things easy. When you can't figure out how to use a web page, that's not your fault. That's bad design. And when you build something people can't attach to, that's something you can work on. I am terrible at doing both. It's one of the reasons at the same time. If I write code, once I'm dealing with error messages and red text, I don't see how awful it looks to the end user. I'm just done writing code. I have to partner with somebody that will come in and look at it and not be along the path with me of, slugging through error messages and lack of connection and certificates and right click and permissions to come back and say, yep, that was easy to do. I keep a group of friends that I want, okay, try this and tell me how easy it is to use, and can I watch you try it? And if they can't hit it intuitively, I've got work to do, and I come back to that. Because you don't want to build applications that nobody wants to use and wasted money on not useful applications. Hopefully with more metrics, as we build that into more applications, unusable code will be worse than bad code or code with errors. So I think riding shotgun on user experience and being able to add user experience to design and dev is a big differentiator. As resume fodder, it's not great. People aren't hiring a lot of UX or developer but as a career differentiator, it's huge. I've gotten a couple of promotions based on seeing things the right way and advocating for users and awards and so forth. That predictive UI from Google Maps, that was user experience. How do I adapt the situation to something that people already understand and know how to use intuitively, as opposed to designing from scratch? So I don't think I have a great answer, or I'd be studying it. I will bring you in on my my next study session, whatever that target is. Architecture is a little bit of a rare air. There's one admin position and half an architect position for every 30 or 40 builder positions. So having fun building and delivering solutions is probably the market choice right now. There's always a need for builder. The need for architects and administrators rises and falls, and I think that's where the value proposition is. So that's my pitch for career pathing near term. I think we've all seen IoT kind of swing and a miss. We've seen big data swing and a miss a little bit as those great career paths. Blockchain, again, lots of hype, not a lot of delivery of actual intrinsic value. We did see some people investing in VR briefly, but like I said, I don't think it'll be there until you can walk into a cafe and not spill your coffee on yourself with the glasses. Once it gets there and it's casual, I think we'll see a shift there, and that'll be fun to do user experience and 3D space.
Yeah, there's obviously, like, you just have a wealth of information in there. There's so much stuff. UX. I think I was in Salesforce probably 2 years before I worked on a big enough project where they had a UI UX team, and I was like, what do you do? Like, because most of it is baked into Lightning Experience, right? We have our own teams here in Salesforce that actually generally bake UX in so that it is consistent across the clouds and the platforms, until you hit what we've acquired, and all of a sudden you're like, ooh, where'd that come from? Why is that different? But when you start doing some custom dev, right, and LWCs, and I've done my own LWCs, and then I look at it, I'm like, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, it doesn't even fit the rest of the Lightning record page I put it on, right? And then you start to understand how UI UX plays into it, and how you can get to it. So yeah, it's a whole field in itself. I'd actually love to sit here and go on a discussion of UI UX, right? Because most people don't even really kind of get a full idea of what it can do. But we have hit the top of the hour. So I'd like to take a moment to thank Paul for your time and all your wisdom. There is a trove of information that you have inside that head. If you say you're not smart, woof, we are in a bad point. So I'd like to thank everyone for spending the time. Paul, you have any final comments, thoughts for us?
No, and the imposter syndrome resonated with me, and I'm like, a lot of people get hit by cars crossing the street, and if you have survived traffic, you are as smart as most other people out there, and you can do. I have I test well. I have a high IQ on paper. I identify as strongly ND. So things that are, some things are easy to me that are hard for other people. Some things are challenging for me that are easy for other people. If you think you're not up to, you would have found out you've been hit by a car a couple of times. Then you might want to think, hey, maybe maybe there's something that I need to look at doing differently. If not, if you are not constantly running into traffic, you are capable of doing everything that everybody else is doing, and don't let imposter syndrome block you from diving into learning. So if I can, as many times as I've done it, there's methods to it, and I've failed at things regularly. I've been told that I'm not good at things, and you just have to slog through it and not believe it, because again, you made it to work, you made it to the office, you made it back home. You've got what it takes to survive along with everybody else. Yeah,
that's some great advice. I will think about that tomorrow. And I'm sitting there going, man, how do we figure this out? And we're like, hey, I didn't get hit by a car today, so I'm doing good. So with that, thank you very much for attending, all of you. And we hope to see you next session. Have a great Wednesday night.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Bye.